a couple of weeks ago, you were talking on the show you had with Ed, you were talking about existence a little bit.
We're talking about what?
You're talking about existence a little bit, what it is. So that's what I wanted to call about, kind of have a reason for or a meaning behind existence, an understanding of it. Because when I listened to some of the questions you were asking, like, for example, you were saying, is existence temporal? To me, that implied, like, a mistaken understanding of it from my point of view.
I apologize, Jared. I'm not completely following what you're saying. When we talk about existence, it is by definition temporal. That it involves time, because if something exists for no time, that's nonsensical. That's up there with married bachelor.
Well, that's what I'm arguing against.
Okay, so you're saying that something can exist for no time?
I'm saying existence is independent of time.
Okay. So then, are you saying that something can exist for no time?
Yes, I suppose so, yeah.
Okay, how? I'm not even sure what that means. That's like saying...
Okay. So...
Go ahead.
I'll describe what I mean by existence. I'll use an example. Let's say we're talking about chess. And we can call that a system. It's based on a set of rules, right? Chess is just a game. It's just a set of rules. So could you say a pawn exists in the game of chess?
A pawn exists in the game of chess?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The concept of a pawn exists, and if you're playing on a physical board, then there's a physical piece that is a pawn, and if you're playing on a virtual board, there's some graphical representation that's pointing to the concept, but yeah.
So I would go more abstract than that. I would say what makes the pawn a pawn isn't whatever that physical representation is.
I agree.
It's how it relates.
What makes the pawn a pawn is the definition of a pawn. The game is structured in such a way that the term pawn applies to this particular concept of a piece that moves and how it can move and under what conditions and what the rules are. It's not anything to do with whether or not we cut out this particular shape. It's not anything to do with whether or not we have a physical piece on a board. We could be playing virtually. You could play in your mind. I mean, I can imagine a chess set right now and start with e4. And there's no physical piece, but I just moved a pawn forward 2 spaces.
Exactly. So the pawn only exists as a relationship in the game, how it relates to the board. The game of chess isn't a physical idea. You could say it's abstract, mathematical.
So there's a difference between physical objects and abstract concepts. But how can that pawn move if there's no time?
Well, is time defined in the game of chess?
Well, there's before and after. The pawn started at e2, and now it's at e4. And the only way it gets from one point to another is to make use of a before and after. Time doesn't have to be this in terms of 1 second, 2 second, 3 second. It's relative. And so there was some moment in time before where the pawn was in a different position, and now it's here, and it can't get from A to B without being bound by time. Otherwise, it would be possible for it to be in both positions at the same time.
So that's really interesting, because then you're saying time doesn't just mean the kind of time that we think of intuitively in our universe. Time is the label that we put on matter and motion. It's a required construct for motion, for anything to happen, and for anything to exist. That's why I was saying I don't know what you could possibly mean by something existing without time. Well, I was thinking in terms of, like seconds passing, like the usual idea that people have of time.
Yeah, but time is just descriptive. It is our way of talking about causality. It is our way about talking about motion.
So if we're thinking of time as like a change in information or like a change in information states,
well, like time is change. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about information or anything else.
Yes, it's a change.
Sure.
So in that case, I think I could agree that time does exist. Like time is inherent if we're talking about it like that. Now, we said that chess has a change. It has its own kind of time, right?
I'm sorry?
So we said chess does have a before and it does have time. It has before and after states.
Well, yeah, a chess game is a sequence of moves, and you can't have a sequence without a concept of time or without time being referenced. A sequence is necessarily temporal as well.
So does that time necessarily stem from our universe, or is it part of the construction of the game itself?
Well, so we are talking about things with respect to a time that is not bound by the game of chess. At some point in the past, you had Big Bang, et cetera, and there's 13.7 billion years and 4 billion years here. The time spans are, for the most part, arbitrary. We just are saying this is how much time based on our system of counting time. But don't confuse, seconds and minutes and light years, which are our attempts to quantify something and to break it down into discrete components. Don't confuse that with the fact that there was a before and then there's a now and there'll be an after.
Mm-hmm.
How much space, or how we quantify the difference between a before and an after. We could say this phone conversation started 13.7 billion eggheads ago. If we wanted to define, egghead as a way to quantify time.
Yeah, that's kind of like how time seems to be quantized. Causality. It seems like it's just there seems to be like a quantum of time, I guess, and we measure like some quantum. But I think I have a slightly different idea, because I don't think the time of chess is necessarily dependent on the universe's time. I think time exists solely within the construct of chess. For example, time is like a part of the system of chess. It's not necessarily part of our time.
So there is
within the rules.
Sure, there is a way to look at a chess game and talk about it having its own time, and you measure that in moves. And that time may be independent. It might be a second between moves. It could be 20 years between moves. But when you're looking at a chess game, assess it in moves. That's imposing.
So that I feel like is, perhaps chess is a bad example because it seems to be bleeding between two things. I'm thinking of chess as a system completely isolated from our reality. Like its own enclosed system of rules and things. So there would be. It's kind of difficult because there are conscious players as part of the rules.
Yeah. You don't get chess. If all the humans in the world disappear, the abstract chess structure has a time-like delineation in there for these are the rules and these are how one would make moves. But if you remove every thinking mind from the universe, it's not like there's time or moves or anything. Every chess game stops.
So, if I can maybe change the analogy a little bit, are you familiar with the Game of Life, John Conway's Game of Life?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a little bit different, right? Because it's a zero-player game. There's no intervention.
No, it's not. It's not a zero-player game.
Well, John Conway himself called it a zero-player game, so I'm not pulling that out.
Sure, that there's not an individual making decisions. But that's running, so it tends to be run on a computer, okay? So you're feeding the rules into the computer, and the computer is dictating the time between generations and the time between morphing and stuff like that. But nothing about that exists absent time. If there was no computer, if there was no passage of time, if there was no before, then there is no evolution, and the game of life stalls. So once again, we're back to without time, nothing exists. It is a necessary component of everything. I mean, if you start the game of life on a computer and you turn the computer off, you take away the time, that game of life's dead. It does not exist.
Now, it was played before computers, though.
Sure.
You could
How was it done before computers?
Well, somebody would write
Somebody would take an action. How do you have any action without time? I think you're getting, and by the way, we're going to go ahead and cut this short because I think a lot of this is getting confused about abstractions. And in reality, you're not really convinced that something can exist outside of time. You're arguing that abstractions about time can be used to describe closed systems and how they act. But we both seem to recognize that if there's not time, then everything ceases.
I won't say we're on the same page, but I won't drag it on any further.
Okay, no. Well, thanks for calling, Jerry.
Well.
All right.
All right. Bye.
What if you just have an initial chessboard layout the way it is at the start of the game, and you remove time? Does the chessboard still exist in that snapshot?
Well, not if you completely remove time, nothing exists.
But you're not actually having a before and after. You're just having, here's the chessboard.
Yeah, so what you actually have is a chessboard with pieces on it, let's say. But as long as it still exists in the universe, time is passing, but nothing is happening with the chess game.
Okay.
It's not any different from there being a rock. But as soon as you remove time, there's nothing left. Which is why,
that is very
I don't know, there's a physicist in the back of the room who could probably explain all this far better than I could as well. But